Well, welcome, everybody. As chairman, I'll call the meeting to order. The meeting of the Johnson County Charter Commission 2021. It's about 4:01 p.m. on Monday, June 14th. I think this is our 5th official meeting of the commission, our 6th overall meeting, if I remember right. We'll start with roll call. Linda, if you would call the roll, please.
Wendy Bingesser.
Wendy Bingesser, present.
Thank you. Mike Bain.
Mike Bain, present.
Karen Brownlee. I think she may be out tonight. Karen, are you there?
Is not in attendance.
Thank you. Vicki Charlesworth.
Present.
Jim Denning.
Jim Denning, present.
Jane Dirks.
Jane Dirks, present.
Jimmy Gaona.
Jimmy Gaona, present.
Tedrick Hausch.
Tedrick Hausch, present.
Randy Hutchins. Randy Hutchins. Okay.
Is not in attendance.
Thank you. Chris Iliff, I think, is out tonight.
He's also not in attendance.
Thank you. Laura Klingensmith.
She is not in attendance.
Okay. Joy Costin is going to be late tonight. Brent McCune.
Brent McCune, present.
Thank you. Eric Michelson.
Eric Michelson, present.
Ed Peterson.
Ed Peterson, present.
Don Rattan. She was here.
I can
Don.
see Dawn. She's
Don, are you mute? You are muted, Don. I'll come back to Don. Don. Leslie Riverola.
Leslie Riverola is here.
Don Roberts.
Don Roberts, present.
Kyle Russell.
Al Russell, present.
Paula Swak.
Paula Schwak, present.
Brenda Sharp.
Brenda Sharp, present.
Greg Shelton.
Greg Shelton, present.
Greg Smith.
Greg Smith is here.
Zach Thomas.
Zach Thomas, present.
Is Don Rattan on now? She's shown in the list, but she is muted. Okay. And Chairman Musel.
Greg Musil here.
If Don is here, I'm showing that we have 20 here and 5 out.
Just
At this
as a note, Laura Klingensmith has also arrived.
Okay. Laura Klingensmith.
Present.
Thank you. Okay.
21 members present. That does represent a quorum. I had been contacted by Karen Brownlee and Chris Illig. They would not be able to join us tonight, and by Joy Costin saying she would be late, probably joining around 5 o'clock. So we have a quorum. First item on the agenda is to approve tonight's agenda, which was sent to you. I don't know exactly. Was it Monday? Today's Monday. Last Friday or Thursday?
It was last Thursday.
Last Thursday. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as published?
To approve the agenda as presented.
Moved by Mr. McCune,
Greg Shelton, second.
seconded by Greg Shelton. Any discussion about the agenda? If not, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. The agenda is approved. The next item is approval of the minutes from our May 26th meeting. seems like forever ago. 19 days ago for that one, and our next one will be in 9 days. So our next meeting will come up very quickly. Any corrections or additions to the minutes as circulated last week? If not, I'd accept a motion to approve the minutes as published.
Mr. Chairman, this is Denning. I would make that motion.
Motion by Jim Denning. Second by Brent McCune. All those, any discussion about the approval of the minutes? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries without opposition as well. We have no old business and new business. There were just some reminders on the agenda. We'll use the chat room simply to acknowledge when you come in or have to leave the meeting, so we have that on record. Again, we'd prefer not to have any commentary or questions posted there because not everybody can see them. And we'd use email to either the Charter Commission email or to Linda, and those will be captured and circulated to everybody on the commission. Website comments, you had your first set of website comments I think Linda sent out. I think there were about 8 or 9 comments from two different people, and she will continue to do that on at least before each meeting. I will note that on meetings, there are a couple meetings where the second Monday and the third Wednesday are very close to each other, or I guess the fourth Wednesday, as they are this month with the 14th and the 23rd. Linda's going to do her best to get minutes out to you and comments ahead of those meetings so you can review them, but we'll have to give her a little grace with that shorter period of time between meetings. The rules of order were sent out as they were amended and adopted, so you should have those. Again, you're welcome to submit questions now that you may have for the county commissioners who will be in front of us in a month or so. And then the last thing item just on notes is we've discussed, and we will do it at some point. I think we've decided to do it after County Government 101. But we want to kind of walk through the existing charter so we all understand what we are looking at. I'd encourage you to reread or read for the first time the full county charter, which is found on the website, which is charter.jocogov.org, charter.jocogov.org. The existing charter, home rule charter, is what we are charged with reviewing as a commission and what we will take public comment on at our 2 planned public hearings. With that, I'll just ask if anybody else has anything else they want to bring to the attention of the commission before we move right into our presentations. I guess I jumped ahead a little bit. On the second page of the agenda, the executive committee with the county staff that has been assigned to us have put together kind of a schedule of what we think we can accomplish over the next June 23rd, July 2nd, and July 28th to get by all of the departments where we had a significant number of commission members say they wanted to hear from them. Then we would move on August 9th to the current commissioners, on August 25th to the 2 former county managers, and follow up with other agencies if there are specific questions, and a follow-up discussion with current county manager Penny Post Oak Ferguson, with the goal of getting to our first public hearing in our first meeting in September. We're not wed or setting concrete on that schedule, but in order to get people prepared ahead of time so that they can get presentations out to you as they did this time for the most part, that's where we're going to plan to go unless we have specific requests to change that. Any specific questions or questions at all about the tentative presentation and meeting schedule? Also understanding we will be in person next time at the KU Edwards Center or Regent Center, and Linda will send out a map to show you which building we're going to. We're going to the best building, the newest building on campus that was funded by the Johnson County education research triangle. But that will come out to you, and there will be a Zoom option for those of you who want to participate virtually or for members of the public. But we will have the opportunity to be in person for that meeting. And I hope we'll see most of you, if not everybody there, if you're comfortable in person. We will do social distancing. Linda and staff have been in the room, and we can get that accomplished even with 25 people. So questions on the tentative presentations and meeting schedule?
Chairman Musil, if I could state that I will send out a map and that, but just to state that if you go on the northwest side of the KU Edwards campus, it's parking lot B, and that is the building furthest to the west is the Best Conference Center, BEST. And I will send out a Zoom invite to everybody. If you do let me know that you need to come in on Zoom, that would be great, but everyone will receive one just so that it goes out to everybody that's on the board.
Please do try to let Linda know if you're going to participate by Zoom so that the IT staff can identify you. But if it's last minute, we'll get you in.
I need to also state that at 4:08 p.m., Karen Brownlee joined by phone. So she is in the meeting now.
Welcome, Karen. I don't see any hands up. And again, I can only see about half of you on my screen in the gallery view. So if you do want to make a comment or ask a question, please just unmute and say so. With that, I think we're quickly getting to our first presentation, which will be by Planning, Housing, and Community Development Director Jay Leipzig. Jay was on this calendar for last month. Graciously let us put him over to this meeting. So Jay, with that, you have your 15 minutes of fame.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, I'm Jay Leipzig, the Planning, Housing, and Community Development Director with Johnson County. I'm a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I know this work that you're all doing is very important. So I do appreciate your time and chance to talk with you a little bit. I'm also supported this afternoon by David Ward, our housing director, is also available by Zoom. If there are additional questions or other things that I'm not able to answer, David is able to answer those as well. The Planning, Housing, and Community Development Department basically encompasses 5 major areas within the county, and that's land planning, building codes, contractor licensing, housing, and transit. Next slide, please, Linda. And so what I've done here, and I apologize, this is a difficult map to look at, but it shows kind of a summary level, high level view of the department. And you have the director position. There's a deputy director of planning that has a planning team that works with him. There's also a county building official that manages the building code aspect. We have a transit business liaison, which acts as kind of manages the transit contract for Johnson County. And then also our housing pieces. We have David Ward, director of housing, and also a CDBG coordinator, which is our grant funds coordinator. So we have that broken out into 2 divisions, which is actually it's a HUD best practices type of issue. So we want to try to keep that separation from accounting so that we don't have one entity or one department overseeing both of those funds. So that's why it's split up like that. We are, I believe, about 45 positions total, and we're about 38 full-time employees within the department who put that all together. Next slide, please, Linda. And I wanted to give a quick overview, since I kid our staff that we're like the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms of the federal government. We have all of these different agencies, departments, and putting them all together and kind of figuring out what the common denominator is, and the common piece is what we're exploring. So we have in the planning, we have several boards that we work with. There's a planning commission, which essentially handles any text amendments or our update to our comprehensive plan. And then we have 3 zoning boards. We have a Southwest zoning board, Southeast, and Northwest, which handles applications for development projects. In other words, plats and plans go through the zoning boards, and then anything that is policy related, such as text amendments or updates to our comp plan, goes before the planning commission. Then we also have a board of zoning appeals, where someone has, if they wish to appeal a decision of the community development director or the planning staff, they can do that through that board of zoning appeals process. There's also a building code board of code review for building code questions. The housing department has a housing and community development advisory committee. Contractor licensing also has a review board that governs them. They are a separate entity. They're completely self-supported, and I'll talk about that here in just a moment. And then we also have the transit component, which is the Johnson County Transportation Council. So we have a lot of different boards that offer recommendations and input as part of that process. Linda, next slide, please. I wanted to give a quick overview of our department mission. Planning, Housing, and Community Development Department promotes safe and coordinated growth by providing sustainable long-range land use planning with the goal of maximizing public benefit. Johnson County contractor licensing, housing and community development, and transit seek to create opportunities for all residents of Johnson County. This mission statement is currently being revised. Transit was brought on board in 2018, the beginning of 2018, and then housing was brought on in the end of 2020. So these are fairly new divisions that are being integrated into the department. And so we are engaging in a strategic planning process actually in the next couple of months to look at developing a new mission statement and vision for the department. As I said, kind of determining what that common denominator is between all of the various divisions. But I think it's an exciting time because we really have a chance to touch all of the land development in the county. The other thing to note, when I say land use planning in the county, that is in the unincorporated areas of the county. So each city has their own planning department, and then we have land planning for the unincorporated area. Is part of when I speak of planning, that's what I'm talking about. Next slide, please. So a funding overview. This is just very high level, basic information. The planning and building codes are part of the general fund. Contractor licensing is self-supported. It's actually funded by renewal fees from contractors in the county. And it's actually one of the highly regarded programs in the country, one of the largest contractor licensing programs in the country. I think the only one that is slightly bigger is Dallas, the metropolitan area of Dallas. Texas has a program that's slightly larger than ours, but ours is very, very big. We get contractors from all over the country that participate in that and offer training as part of that process. Transit is funded by the general fund as well as the federal and state grants. And then we also have housing and community development are also funded by grants in the general fund. Next slide, please, Linda. So quick funding overview in terms of the amounts. General fund and planning is $1,236,000. And building codes is $543,000. As I mentioned, contractor licensing is self-funded at $1,661,000. Next slide, please. And then if you look at our both general fund and grant funded programs, housing, the total revenue is about $15,397,000, which $675,000 comes from general funding or ad valorem. The remainder of that is coming from Department of Housing and Urban Development, the various housing programs. And then transit is about $17,980,000, where $6.82 million is general funding and ad valorem, and the rest coming from grants and various sources. Next slide, please, Linda. So strengths of the department, we have a highly knowledgeable and certified staff. As I mentioned before, we have this common link for development between all of these divisions, and we really can see a project go from, the planning phase on a piece of paper to all the way to a built structure, and then can link that with transit as well as the housing component as well. So I think it's a great opportunity to link all these different pieces together and be able to touch a variety of projects in meaningful ways throughout the county. And as mentioned, we're in the process of developing the strategic plan. We have just started that. We had an initial meeting with the department, and then we have a follow-up meeting next month to talk about that and develop the mission statement and the value statement for the department that really links all of these things together. As I said, this is fairly new information, or a new concept bringing housing in. So it's a chance to work on the strategic plan as a group. Departmental weaknesses. We really are. I don't think there's anything that's a critical weakness. It is difficult sometimes that we have departments or divisions within the department that are in different buildings. For example, we have planning, building, and contractor licensing in one building, and then we have the housing department that is at the multi-service center at 87th Street. But I think actually that is makes more sense for housing to be where it's at because it's more centrally located in the county. Whereas the planning and building piece in Olathe, since we're dealing with the rural areas, that makes sense. So, but it's sometimes hard to engage all of the staff together when we're in different buildings like that. But there are different ways to work through that, and I think we're doing that pretty effectively. As I mentioned, separate division office locations. It's one of the key issues that is being looked at or being reviewed as part of the facilities master plan. They're also looking at this issue as well. And if you haven't heard about that, you probably will as we go through our new process, especially with the new, post-pandemic and the new world of work and how we reutilize office space. I think will be a consideration as we move into the future. The other issue that is a little bit unique in the county that is confusing to the public sometimes is we have separate zoning boards and a planning commission. Traditionally you have one planning commission that reviews applications and plats and plans, and then makes recommendations for amendments to the subdivision regulations or the comp plan. In the county, we have them separated. And I think actually that does provide some benefit because different areas of the county are different. There's different growth patterns. There's just different perceptions from where you are located in the county. I think as we continue to grow and as we become more, I say the rural area, but it's really a suburban area. And so as we continue to grow, that is something that the county long-term might want to look at a traditional planning commission zoning board concept together, but I don't think we're quite there yet. I think the system we have now is still very effective. So with that, Mr. Chair, and members of the commission, that concludes my high-level overview for you, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Commissioner, this is Paula Schwach, if I might. Jay, so good to see you again.
Yes, same to you.
A question with regard to that $15 million in housing funding. These are community development block grant funds. Could you talk a little bit about the policy parameters that direct the funding or the allocation of those dollars? For example, how much is going to actual housing versus, let's say, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and street repaving that we see some of the larger entitlement communities using their dollars for?
Okay. Commissioner, I appreciate the question. I'm going to defer that to David Ward, if you wouldn't mind. If you're available, if you wouldn't mind answering that. You might be you're our expert on these type of things.
Good afternoon, everyone. David Ward, Johns County Housing Department. In response to the question of the housing budget, I'm going to deal in round numbers here just for easy math, okay? So for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, more commonly known as Section 8, we're dealing with about $1 million a month in HAP, which is housing assistance payments. Okay, so that'll be the rent assistance portion going to the landlord. So $12 million a year on that. It's actually about 12.5. We have about $1 million in administrative funds that we earn through that program. That's how we're able to be substantially self-sustaining with our department operations. Beyond that, I'm going to have $1 million roughly a year in home investment partnership funds. To speak on that for just a second, kind of by statute, 70% of that goes to projects in our jurisdiction. 15% goes to CHODO activities, community housing development organizations, which would be basically not-for-profit builder developers. Then the rest of it would be administrative funding on that, the remaining 15%. Community development block grant funds that actually come into housing. It's supplemented with some city funding and some private foundation funding that governs the Minor Home Rehabilitation Program. That is about $400,000 a year coming in on that. The CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funding, is just over $1 million, Jay. I'm not sure exactly what that number is, but it's typically just over $1 million. That would be set aside toward the going toward more the projects at the municipal level, as well as I believe the social services cap on that is 15% of the annual award to the county. So does that answer the question clearly? That was a lot of numbers in a short period of time.
It does. It was very helpful. Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? I see Mayor Boehm has his hand up.
Great, thank you. Jay, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
First of all, is the separate zoning and planning commission item that you just spoke of part of the charter?
You were Mayor. I apologize. You were kind of I locked up on my machine. I'm not sure locked up on others, but I think you asked if it was part of the our actual charter. That I am not sure, frankly, if it is or not.
Okay, I think we ought to look at that because while it may not be necessary now, 10 years from now is a long time.
Yes,
we should at least consider authorizing that.
Yep.
If it's within our purview.
Yep, and I will say I've kind of come full circle on that. Is one of the things when I first, started with the county, I thought it was very unusual, and looking at I didn't understand it, and then over time, as I've gone through more planning and zoning meetings and working with the planning commission, each area does have a slightly different just perception, I think, of rural. And in terms of their working with the various components and the planning applications. So I see some advantage keeping them separate, but as we do continue to grow and our population increases, that's something that long-term we probably should look at again.
Okay, my guess is they have very unique characters. It has a consistent staff though. So I look Lenexa is landlocked, so it won't affect us going forward. Other communities that may someday annex into the unincorporated areas, there's no real uniformity on what they may be picking up if you have 3 different bodies reviewing applications. The second question was recently the Kansas City Star ran an article about the authority of the ATA and the ability for them to incent and guide development as part of their authority. I'm not expecting an answer on this tonight, but I would like you to give us a 1-pager on what the impacts of that would be to unincorporated Johnson County and Johnson County in general. Cities will have their own discussions on that item, but it will affect the county as well. And I'd be curious how you anticipate dealing with that, or does that need to be elevated to a discussion that maybe 20 years ago made sense, but when it was adopted, or 40 years ago, whenever it was, but may not be quite as relevant today?
Okay. Yeah, sir. Thank you. I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
I would just, in that, Jay, I would include discussion of how if the ATA exercises its authority in Missouri, how that could have an impact on Johnson County, not just if they exercise it in Johnson County, on the overall ability of ATA to continue to fund its core services. Greg Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jay, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. my question is more on to the charter itself. Does it impact you guys on a daily basis at all? And are there, if it does, how so? And are there any changes, or is it work for you?
I would say it doesn't impact us on a daily basis. The charter works pretty well. I don't have any major issues with it. I think it's in terms of processing planning applications and land use applications, the system works very well. I think the way it's set up with the recommendations from the zoning boards and then to the Board of County Commissioners, and it's a very efficient system. Everyone has a say or has a chance to respond to projects and offer input on projects. And so I think as planning, that's something I guess I'm especially sensitive to, make sure that everyone has a chance to comment on projects. And I think we do that very well. And the charter gives us that ability to do that.
Thank you.
I know that Cynthia and Maury are always listening in from staff. I think one of the things that we ought to look at with the question that Mayor Boehm raised is also that a lot of the planning functions are restricted by statute or statutory requirements that would be outside the charter, but would be required by state law. So that interaction would be important to understand as well. Ed Peterson and then Dawn.
Thank you. Jay, where do you see public transit going in Johnson County? And do we have enough, do you feel like we've staffed that up properly? Is additional funding going to be needed? Where do you see that going generally? And is it likely to stay within your department if it's going to grow significantly?
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I appreciate the question. I will say, in my opinion, we have a business liaison that functions and kind of coordinates the activities between the county and the ATA, and those are contracted out. I think the system that we have works very well. We're in the process currently of having going through a visioning process on transit with the Board of County Commissioners. In other words, what do they envision transit looking like or functioning as in Johnson County? And so much of that, the Area Transportation Authority are the folks that actually have the programs and do in terms of the routes and the numbers and that type of thing. But I do think it's important that we have transit to provide means of transportation for people with jobs, for housing, and those linkages, and especially in our more urban areas of the county, for our major routes. And I think that is important, and the ATA provides those tools to be able to do that. So in terms of the long term with the county, in terms of managing that contract, I think the way it is currently completed works well. I think in terms of additional staffing, someday might be necessary as we continue to expand our other programs. We also have, our micro transit program, for example, or that connection working with other special needs populations, which is always a critical piece, especially as the county ages. And we're continuing to look at other ways we can provide those services. But I think that the structure, having a business liaison that can look at analyzing that contract and figuring out what those missing pieces are, and kind of working as a liaison between the Board of County Commissioners that sets the policy and working with an agency like the ATA, for example, to implement.
Dawn Rattan.
Hello. I'm wondering, does planning have any goals or measures regarding affordable housing or housing for aging populations? Goals or measures, or what are your future plans?
We do. I will tell you that all of our goals are part of our consolidated annual plan that we have that is published. As part of that document. And David, I don't know if you want to go into more detail on that, but that is something we look at every year, and that is submitted to the Department of Housing and Urban Development as part of that process. And we're continuing to work not only for low-income people and families, but also with those vulnerable populations. And that will be the challenge, I think, in the future, is continue to look for ways to provide those services to people.
I'd like to add on to that, Jay, if I may.
Sure.
We are predominantly users of affordable housing more than producers of affordable housing. I think actually venture to say we are the largest single user of affordable housing in the county. I think our look to the future is to see how we can impact both development and redevelopment of affordable housing on a kind of a longer term sustainable basis. And that is, I think that's something that is in process now.
I'm looking for other hands. In the meantime, Jay and Randy Hutchins has joined us. Linda, I don't know if you saw that. Welcome, Randy. We talked about the ATA contract, but can you give some of us who don't fully understand it an overview of what that relationship is between Johnson County and the Kansas City Area Transit Authority?
Sure. The Johnson County used to have its own transit system, and I believe in 2008 or 9 that was moved over to the KCATA. So they actually provide the staffing to do that and the route management. And there are still Johnson County assets in terms of buses. We provide those, but the staffing for the bus service is all through the management with the KCATA. And so, as you know, transportation modeling and planning is a very complicated kind of objective issue. So they have all of those routes carefully monitored and listed and tabs in terms of the numbers, daily ridership. And so we're always looking at ways we can link that service delivery with our for employment centers, for example, for housing. Although it's difficult in Kansas City as a whole, because we are just not a very dense city. And I think in order to have high levels of ridership, it just requires a lot of density that we just don't have in Kansas City. But it's, as I said, it's one of the issues that the board is looking at, is creating a long-term vision for what transit might look like in the county.
I guess following up on what Don asked about housing, are there metrics that we use, your business liaison uses in transit, to figure out if we're getting our fair share out of that contract?
Yes, yeah, we do. We actually have quite a few metrics that we use in terms of performance indicators, on-time delivery, the fare box recovery, looking at the total ridership, the routes, the distance on those routes. And then we have new software pieces where, just in terms of outside of the metrics piece, but just in terms of creating a more user-friendly environment where someone is able to download an app for both the entire ATA system and also the microtransit piece, to have it all together into one component like that just makes it easier. But yes, there are several metrics, and I could be happy to provide that information to you too as well.
Other questions? Again, if you can just speak up, because I can't see everybody. Couple more minutes we have with Jay before we'll have to kick him loose. And Jay,
follow-up question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Quick follow-up question, Mike Bain. Jay, you mentioned the fare box recovery. I see in the media all the time that Mayor Lucas has eliminated the fee in Kansas City, Missouri. How's that affecting the Johnson County ridership? Are we in that same program, or is it different?
Well, it is different. Technically, we are, although with our COVID, the fees were eliminated before through pre-COVID. So we that is something for discussion in the future. See how that impacts things. But Johnson County is a different service. So obviously we want to keep that in mind, so it's convenient for the riders, and it's to provide that continuity.
David and Jay, if you're able to stick around and we have time at the end, we'll open it up again for questions of all the presenters. If not, we understand, and we may get some submissions by email that will be forwarded to you by Linda.
Okay.
But absent other questions right now, I'll pause for just a second before we move on to corrections. Any final questions for David Ward or Jay Leipzig? Thank you, gentlemen.
Chair,
yes.
before we move on, I think you stated of Randy Hutchins coming in at 4:35. We had Joy Costin that came in at 4:30. And also, I think I stated earlier, Karen Brownlee came in at 4:08. So we are at only one is absent at this time. We're at 24 and 1.
Thank you.
Dawn has her hand up.
I saw that.
Could you provide a link to that consolidated annual plan and the notes when they come out?
Yes, sure, be happy to.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much. We will move
Thanks,
on
you
to
all.
corrections and Robert Sullivan. We all received your presentation ahead of time, Robert. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Linda, is it all right if I start screen sharing?
Yes.
Let me try this.
And if you do the slideshow, share and then do slideshow. Start from the beginning.
Are you seeing the presentation side, or are you guys seeing the presenter?
We're seeing you right now.
Oh,
We did have it. You did have it up.
okay. Linda, I might just go ahead and let you run it. I apologize to everyone. Let me stop sharing.
You already did.
Don't apologize. We all rely on Linda.
Can everyone see that now?
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate that. Well, good
Sure.
afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Robert Sullivan. I'm joined today by our division directors, Earl Taylor, Keith Clark, and Ted Jester. So they'll help me answer questions at the end of the presentation. Linda, can we go to the next slide, please? So today I tend to discuss with you our role as part of county government, go over our budget and our reporting structure with you. We'll talk about how the current structure helps or possibly limits our department's ability to serve residents. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the biggest challenges we need to confront in the next 10 years as a department. Next slide, Linda. So as far as our charge, what we really strive to do is to assess risk and needs of the folks that we serve, and then use that information to develop individualized programming based upon those assessments. And so one way to kind of sum that up is what I put here as far as corrections is charged with developing innovative solutions to reoccurring social problems by creating pathways to success. And we want to do that without jeopardizing the safety and property of Johnson County residents. Next slide, please. So our budget is about $30.5 million. 22% comes from state grant funds, 27% from public safety sales tax, 39% from county tax support, and then the remaining 12% is generated by fee funds or prior year carryover reimbursement funding. As far as FTEs, we have 290 funded full-time positions. And then I broke that down so that you could see how many of those positions are allocated to each one of our divisions. And then corrections is spread out across 5 locations in Lenexa, Olathe, and New Century. Next slide, please. So kind of wanted to be able to provide kind of a high-level overview of what corrections does. So we have 4 major divisions within our department. And so I'll just start with Juvenile Services Center. Juvenile Services Center has a 69-bed juvenile detention center. We also have a juvenile intake and assessment program. Juvenile intake and assessment, if a young person, a youth under the age of 18, but older than the age of 10 years of age or older, has a police interaction, they are either brought to juvenile intake and assessment, or they're given a notice to appear to juvenile intake and assessment and released to a parent. Also, for any youth under the age of 18 that potentially could be a child in need of care, they're brought to juvenile intake and assessment as a child in need of care. And we will find a placement for that youth during the first 72 hours while the investigation is going on by the district attorney's office and the Department for Children and Families. And then we have a juvenile pretrial supervision program, so that as an alternative to detention, sometimes a judge may release them to pretrial supervision. Our adult residential center is a 398-bed facility on a 15-acre campus at New Century. Our adult residential center involves a 50-bed, 6-month inpatient treatment program known as Therapeutic Community. We also have a work release program for both prison and jail inmates. Currently, there's a residential center that provides highly structured programming for people on probation. And then more recently, this last year, the Adult Residential Center also started to lodge municipal inmates. Field Services is both adult and juvenile intensive supervised probation, juvenile case management, both adult and juvenile electronic monitoring programs. We also have a bond assessment unit that's embedded in the sheriff's office to do pretrial risk assessments for folks that are placed in jail prior to their first appearance. And then that information gets sent to court and counsel. Then we also have staff that are probation intake office that's in the courthouse. And so if somebody is ordered to probation, that's their first stop. And then finally, we have just our administrative operations, and that includes project management and our business analytics, security investigations, as well as our staff development and fidelity. Linda, could we go to the next slide? So I got 2 slides here just to talk about our reporting structure. Community corrections is interwoven throughout our operations. So they're spread out amongst every single one of our divisions. So I just really wanted to touch base about community corrections. It's a statutorily mandated program. And in Kansas, we use a bifurcated system. So you can see we have the judicial branch that oversees court services, and they do misdemeanor probation, low risk felony, so on and so forth. But then on the executive branch, that's where community corrections falls in, but it's pass-through dollars. So funding and oversight is provided by the Kansas Department of Corrections, but community corrections is a county-run program. It's just the dollars come through the county commissioners for community corrections programs. And then, of course, parole is a state program that's also overseen by the Kansas Department of Corrections. But sometimes these 3 get used interchangeably. And so I just wanted to kind of quickly go over that system, because community corrections is part of our entire operations. The other thing too is community corrections has been around since 1978. And in the very beginning, it was completely optional. Counties didn't have to have a community corrections program, and it stayed that way until 1989. And then it was no longer optional, and that's when it became a state mandated program. And it's been that way ever since. In between 1989 and 2013, we also included the Juvenile Justice Authority. They came on board in 1997. That was still part of community corrections. They just oversaw all juvenile operations. But in 2013, Juvenile Justice Authority went away and became part of the Kansas Department of Corrections. So our statutorily mandated programs would encompass both adult and juvenile intensive supervised probation, juvenile case management, as well as juvenile intake and assessment. Linda, next slide, please. So this would be a graphic representation of the current reporting structure for our department. So we answer to my direct report would be Maury Thompson, And so you can see how that works. So the solid lines would be kind of our chain of command, if you will. And then the dashed lines would be more of an advisory relationship. And so Kansas Department of Corrections oversees community corrections in conjunction with the Board of County Commissioners. And then we also have other programs within the Department of Corrections that are solely a county-run program, 100%. As far as the current structure, we work really well with the current structure and don't really have a whole lot of, don't have any problems really. As far as limitations, the one thing that I wanted to highlight is with regards to our community corrections programming, state grant funding for, at least on the adult side, has remained flat for the last 8 years. And so county support has stepped in to help keep our caseload ratios manageable and to help, because over those 8 years, personnel costs have increased, benefit costs have increased, as well as contractual obligations. And so the county support has been crucial for that. But that would be the one limitation with the current structure. But I don't know that the Charter Commission really could cover that aspect of it. Next slide, please. So as far as challenges, I highlighted these next 3 slides, some of the most significant challenges that we anticipate as a department over the next decade. And for us, the drug problem in Johnson County, it touches almost every aspect of our operations in some way, shape, or form. And just to kind of give you guys some examples, since 2010, meth filings have increased 409%. We had 107 in 2010, and this last year there were 545. Looking at pretrial risk assessments, we recently did some analysis of 5,720 pretrial risk assessments. And the reason why we looked at pretrial risk assessments is because, for the most part, with a few exceptions, those are individuals that are targeted for presumptive probation. So they're going to be with either corrections or with court services. So looking at that population, what we found was that 30% of all presumptive probation cases were charged with a drug-related crime. But if you were to look at their substance use history, regardless of what their crime was, 76% of all defendants had a history of substance abuse. And then finally, with MEDAC, 5% of all incidents that MEDAC responds to are in regards to a drug or alcohol issue. And so just to kind of give you guys a little bit of an idea of what the drug problem is. And then just as far as that revolving door with our jail, and we're a contributor to that. Thought it was really interesting. Last week, I asked Jim's to pull data for me, and 50% of people booked in the county jail so far this year has had a prior booking within the last 5 years. And that's not to imply that all of those are new crimes. Some of those, a lot of those folks are going back to jail on either probation violations, bench warrants for failure to appear, technical violations on pretrial supervision. And so I just didn't want to give the impression that all of that's new crime. Some of that, yes, is new crime, but others of it is due to other factors. Next slide, please. So again, based on looking at pretrial risk assessment data, and again, I chose this data set because these are, for the most part, presumptive probation cases. So these are folks that we're going to be seeing eventually. Looked at the top 5 charge descriptions in this particular data set, and I just simply overlaid that. The one on the left would be substance use history. So you can see what those top 5 charge descriptions are and what percent of those charges were substance use related. And then on the right side would be exact same top 5 charge descriptions, but the red bar would show what the mental health flag was. And so how many of those folks would be recommended for further evaluation by a qualified mental health professional. And then last slide, please, Linda. And then housing, you guys talked to Jay quite a bit about housing. We're seeing the same thing on the correction side. And so looking at our data, what we find is we release about 350 people a year to Johnson County. When I say we, I mean the Kansas Department of Corrections releases from a Kansas prison about 350 inmates a year to Johnson County. Last year, that was about 380. And then historically, the they're finding when the council state governments came in and worked with the Kansas Department of Corrections, they found that about 20% of people leaving Kansas prisons each year were housing insecure. And so I just wanted to, when you look at that 350 number, about 20% of those are coming back to Johnson County with housing insecurity. And some of the other things that are drivers to that is when you look at the Kansas Department of Corrections annual report, from one year to the next, about 25 to 32% of individuals are serving 1 year or less. And about 20% of those folks are serving actually 6 months or less. So it can be really disruptive. You need to fulfill your obligations to the court, but then if you don't have some supports when you get released, it does set you up for failure in some cases. And so that is a challenge for us, and Corrections has been trying to think of some innovative ways to help set people up for success their very first day upon release. And so with that concludes my, again, a very high level overview of the Department of Corrections, and we'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. Oh,
This is
Brenda, go ahead.
Two questions. One's probably quicker than the other. Are SYNC kids and JIAC kids who've been arrested on some type of criminal activity, are they still being held together in JIAC while they're being processed? I know that was a concern for many years on the part of child advocates. So that's question number one. And then two, we've asked a couple of the other presenters, how is this department, how is your department evaluating and thinking about racial disparities and inequities in the populations that you come into contact with, and plans to address some of that?
So yes, so in regards to if you're a child in need of care, you're going to be brought across the street to Youth and Family Services. You won't be taken to the juvenile detention side. And so as far as the separation between child in need of care and juvenile offenders, yes, they are separated. And then as far as racial disparities, Johnson County has been looking at disproportionate minority contact, at least on the juvenile side, since 2008. And in fact, right now, the Burns Institute is currently meeting with our staff as well as several of our organizational partners to help them come up with an overall assessment around disproportionate minority contact, and looking at ways that we can further reduce disparity in our local criminal justice system, specifically as it pertains to juveniles. We still got a lot more work to do on that. While we have made gains, especially on the juvenile side, there's still more work. And one of the first things that comes to mind when I say there's still more work to do is, if you were to look at our detention population today, there's a pretty large disparity between minority youth and their white counterparts. And but one of the things that we would trumpet is the fact that if you also look at our juvenile population in detention, I don't think anybody would argue that every single one of those youth need to be there. What we could do better on is going back farther upstream and looking at root causes. We're pretty far downstream when it comes to corrections. We don't arrest them, we don't charge them, we don't sentence them, but we are part of that conversation. We can also do a better job when it comes to community outreach efforts. We have started that process, reaching out to partners in the community to be part of those committees and to kind of look at what we're doing and what more we can do, but we could do more of that. And then finally, on the adult side, we're not near as far on the adult side as what we are on the juvenile side. So again, a lot more work that we can do when it comes to that area.
Before we go on, let's go to Zach and then Mike Boehm, Zach Thomas and Mike Boehm. But Brenda knows all this, but SYNC and JIAC, could you make sure we all understand what those are?
Yes, SYNC is child in need of care. JO would be a juvenile offender, and JIAC is Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center.
Thank you.
Apologize for that.
It's all right. We all fall into that. Zach, go ahead, and then Mike Boehm.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Sullivan, thank you so much for the presentation. I even found it just educative, even though I'm in the system all the time. So I appreciate that. I've got three hopefully quick questions for you, and I'll just lay it out. One's been a rumor about the TC disappearing or funding for that going away and not having any sort of therapeutic community for substance abuse issues. So I wanted you to touch on that. I also want to applaud the work with the residential center. I know when dealing with municipal courts, the ability for municipal court offenders to go to the residential center as opposed to jail and maintain employment and do things like that has been fantastic. I've had clients of mine that have taken advantage of that. A question I have about that, though, is costs for the client. One client's being charged $70 a day, and that seemed a little high, so I didn't know if that was proper or not. And then finally, your graphs were extremely telling. Something I've focused upon in recent time is the amount of drug dependency and mental health issues that plague the system and kind of clog the door that is the justice system. What kind of push is there from your side for anything like a mental health court or a drug treatment court that they have in other counties? Sorry to lay out 3 long ones for you, but hopefully we can get some answers.
So for your first question, the therapeutic community is not going anywhere. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Earl is in the process of, here in about another month or so, of kicking off a meeting, at least internally in the beginning, but we will be inviting organizational partners to participate in this conversation around a reimagining of therapeutic community. So for the rest of the committee, therapeutic community is a 6-month inpatient treatment program. And what we would like to do is really kind of reimagine the therapeutic community with input from all of our organizational partners to see if, one, what needs are getting met, what needs aren't getting met, and does everybody need 6 months? Could there be some folks that could participate in inpatient treatment for a much shorter duration, or are there folks that need a much longer duration, depending on their drug of choice? And so just, and then also we know that we have a lot of co-occurring disorders. And so we want to look at curriculums, and are there curriculums that can better meet the needs of a population that has both mental health and substance use related issues? And so it's quite the opposite. The TC is not going away anytime soon. We're also going to look at that 50-bed capacity. Is that the right capacity, or is the community greater than that? And then, you know, are we kind of locked into that 50-bed capacity right now? That's what we're licensed for. But at least try and get a realistic assessment of what that need is, and then what it would take to meet that capacity. So those would be the kinds of conversations that are going to happen around therapeutic community, but it is not going away. As far as the cost for a client, the most that we can charge by county resolution is $20 a day. And so I'm not sure where the $70 comes from. That's the first time I've heard this. And then the exception would be for prison work release. It's up to 25% of their salary or their pay. And so, but no, and Earl can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure where that $70 figure came from.
It was a city of Olathe case, not prison involved. I'll look into it or reach out to you all to see what's going on.
Okay, please do. And then lastly.
Hey, Zach, Earl Taylor with the Adult Residential Center. Our municipal inmates, we do not charge them anything. We charge the municipal court $35 a day. And then however the municipal court decides to bill the client or whatnot, but the Department of Corrections does not directly charge anything to that client for a municipal stay.
Understood. Thank you. I knew what your pricing was, and I was shocked to see that. So it must be a city thing, and that's perfectly fine. Thank you.
And then to your last question with regards to drug courts, had multiple conversations with organizational partners, specifically with Judge Ryan and with Steve Howe. And I don't think Steve Howe is supportive of a drug court at this time. And Judge Ryan and Judge McCarthy, they are in fact very much supportive of a drug court. And just our role in this is just to help out in any way that we can. We're definitely not opposed to a drug court. We think problem-solving courts can definitely provide some value. But I don't think as it is today, not all the organizational partners are on the same page on that. So there's just more discussions to come. And both sides raise good points. And if ultimately Johnson County wants to pursue a drug court, we will absolutely support that. TC would be part of that as well. And so would our community corrections operations. But I don't know if that answered your question, Mr. Thomas, but.
Your position on there, I think, is perfect. I'd love to hear that. So I love to hear the ongoing movement towards that and addressing a clear need. we have here in this community. So thank you.
Mayor Michelson?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Sullivan and Jay, for your presentations. I'm struck by some of the overlap and some of the big challenges facing your divisions in Johnson County. And in particular, you mentioned housing insecurity being a significant factor in recidivism amongst your staff or your inmates. I'm wondering to what extent your corrections and community and planning, housing and community development and other divisions of Johnson County are coordinating amongst yourselves on some of these priorities that affect all of your respective missions, both with amongst the divisions of Johnson County and then also in some of the community stakeholders, like cities, for example, and United Community Services has been doing a major housing study for Johnson County. So I guess would love your thoughts. It seems to me like all of those groups should be coordinating and talking amongst each other periodically. Hopefully that's happening on a practical basis. I mean, structurally, is that built in? Are there regular meetings on big challenges like that, or other ways that you're coordinating structurally? And then practically, how does that actually work on a big problem like that, which by all reports is kind of heading the wrong direction in Johnson County right now on, home values outpacing wages and salaries for quite some time?
What the group that meets, the name is escaping me right now, but we have staff that are part of that coalition that's around housing and talks around housing. I can talk somewhat intelligently about specifically what corrections is doing to address this, but as far as our involvement more with cities and with UCS, and I can't talk as intelligently about that. But I can talk to you about kind of how our staff, we have resource developers and our case managers that work with landlords. And we also work with Oxford houses, and we can also talk about problem solving beds that we've established for justice involved individuals. But I don't want to put any of the other directors on the spot in case they don't know either, if they could speak to it, but I can't speak intelligently as to the level of collaboration with my department and all those partners, specifically to housing.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jay Leipzig. I'll just say a couple words on things in terms of housing. As mentioned, the UCS, United Community Services, the housing study is currently being discussed by the various cities. The county is also looking at that, and we're working with our Board of County Commissioners to have detailed discussions in terms of what particular steps the county could take on in terms of providing or furthering affordable housing in the county. I know that we meet with those agencies on a regular basis to talk about it. There's also some overlap on our transportation council as well, that obviously focused on transportation issues, but they also have and talk about housing issues quite regularly. It's not as a formalized structure as it could be, but there are some discussions that overlap some of those groups or some of those subject areas.
Move on, and the last two questions for corrections will be Mayor Boehm and Greg Smith.
Thank you. One question directly to Robert, and then Greg, I have a general statement to you and the group. If I read slide 10 correctly, we received 350 inmates from the Department of Corrections into Johnson County last year. Would I assume that Douglas, Sedgwick, Johnson, or Shawnee and Wyandotte received similar numbers? I'm curious, how many are those 5 counties sending into corrections, to get a context of how many were sending and how many we're receiving back. Then I question the logic of sending people back to a community that they don't know anyone. That's the most expensive housing in the state, in these counties, most likely. I understand you may want to separate them from their bad past history and associations, but to drop them into an expensive county with no contacts, I don't think gives them a very good head start to reintegrate either. So just talk to me about that in general.
So as far as numbers, the number of folks that Johnson County sends to prison each year, I can get those numbers for you very easily. The Secretary of Corrections does an annual report each year. And so I can pull precisely how many over, say, the last 3 years that we've sent to prison as a county. And then I can get the numbers of that return to Johnson County each year that are released from prison back to Johnson County. And so I know the releases, in 19 and 20, it was 350 each of those years. And then last year, I believe it was about 380. And then I want to say it's close to 600 admissions from Johnson County each year, but I want to confirm that. And again, it'd be very easy for me to get that information for you.
Okay. And then Greg, general question for the group at some point. I've noticed on some of the presentation, HR is handled in certain departments and then countywide as well. At some point, the county manager, I'd like to know who determined. To me, IT and HR probably are centralizable functions as opposed to department by department. I know they all have different skill sets, but every business has that. So I'd like to hear the logic on why IT in particular and HR isn't centralized and how that's determined. Thank you.
That's a great follow-up with Manager Postoke Ferguson when we have her back. Greg, you've got the last word or question on corrections.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Robert, thank you for the presentation. Of all the challenges that we've heard mentioned that go on in corrections, and I'm aware of most of them myself, what can this commission do to assist you to make your job easier or more efficient? What can the Charter Commission do for you?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I tell you, the way the current charter is set up, it just really lends itself well to the way that we do business. I'm not, honestly, nothing immediately comes to mind that the commission could do or change to make it, to increase our ability to serve residents. As just the county has done a phenomenal job of supporting our operations each year. And so I can't think of any changes to the current structure that would need to be put in place to increase our ability to serve the residents of Johnson County.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Greg, you've asked that question a number of times. It's the right question. I mean, we probably for future presentations, we'll put that on their plate ahead of time because it's kind of why we're here. So I appreciate the question. All right, we're going to let you go, Robert and Eric, and move on now to emergency management with
Chair.
Ellen Wernicke.
Excuse me, Chair. We did have Karen Brownlee left the meeting again at 4:44 p.m. I do need to state that we have an issue with our Facebook feed, and we would like to, Zoom will stay running just like it is. Everybody can stay on, but we need to have a couple minutes to restart our Facebook because closed captioning stopped happening on the actual Facebook feed. And we need to have a couple minutes. So if we could just take a couple minutes break, but everybody on Zoom needs to stay right where they're at. And Facebook will just have a new pop-up as soon as they can get Facebook restarted.
Linda, the closed captions are working now. I was following that thread and it appears that the closed captions are working now.
Okay, just one second. Let me check with our IT.
Hey, Greg, while we're waiting, I don't know if I needed to speak up. I had one brief question that maybe can be taken up later by Robert Sullivan, but I can wait till the end too if we need to.
Well, I think if we're waiting so that the whole public gets the opportunity, we'll hold that. Then we'll see if you had time at the end, but I want to make sure we've got 45 minutes for our last two presenters. I know you know how to submit it by email to Tedrick, so Robert will be on the edge of his chair waiting for your question.
Chair,
go ahead.
Chair, we are live now. We can proceed. Thank you, and I apologize.
Thank you, members of the public. If you're watching the Facebook feed, we apparently had some issues, at least with the closed captioning. We're now back on. It's 5:21 p.m. We had concluded with our presentation by the Department of Corrections, Robert Sullivan. And we're going to move now to the emergency management presentation by Ellen Warnicki. Ellen, are you available? You have the floor.
I am. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Warnicki. I'm the Director of Emergency Management and Communications. So thank you for your time this afternoon. Linda, can you move forward? Okay, so our mission covers our 4 service areas, which are 911, emergency management, communications infrastructure, and the medical director program. Next slide. So these before you are mission-driven initiatives that, again, cover the 4 service areas I just went over. As you know, emergency management has really been at the forefront over the last year in response to the pandemic. Their focus, their work focuses primarily on the mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery from disasters. Our emergency communications unit serves as the 911 answering point for all fire and EMS calls countywide, and we do so with the highest quality to meet the needs and expectations of our community. The Communications Services Division provides the technical and communication support and systems in order to deliver our emergency services to the communities and those agencies that we serve. And then we have the medical director program, and obviously the medical director is focused on patient outcome and ensuring that we're delivering the highest quality of care throughout the EMS system. And I'm certain that Chief Davis will touch on that during his presentation as well. Next slide, Linda. So these are just a couple of our supporting initiatives. We're always striving to have collaborative partnerships with our internal partners, but those partners that we have across the county, the region, and the state. We're always looking for ways to more efficiently and effectively deliver our service. Can you step back one, Linda? Sorry. And then we have a strong focus on our staff, organizational culture, and operations to make sure that we have an innovative team and we're delivering the highest quality of service. Next slide. So I thought this was important, mostly because it tells a story. And while this doesn't obviously present all the milestones through the years, I think it's important that you understand how we became who we are. The first dispatch center was created back in 1952. I failed to include 1974, which is when that fire alarm center came under the direct control of Johnson County government. In 1981, the Fire Alarm Center became the Johnson County Emergency Communications Center. And then kind of fast forward to 2007, the countywide public safety radio system, which is managed by our Communications Services Division, moved from the Sheriff's Office to our department. And also that year, we broke ground on the new County Communications Center up on Sunset in Olathe, which I'll touch on here in just a little bit. And then in 2011, the Emergency Management Department and the Emergency Communications Center merged formally, and we became the Department of Emergency Management and Communications. Next slide, Linda. It's just a quick snapshot of our budget. Our budget projections for 2022 are approximately $6 million. We have pretty flat FTEs at 52 that cover our 4 service areas. Next slide. So Johnson County also serves as the administrator of the 911 funds that are received for both Johnson County government and the cities that run PSAPs. So those 911 fees are imposed upon any phone that can access 911. So those go to a local area collection point, and those are passed on to the county. So those funds are administered through our office with county support. Next slide. So our emergency communications and our operations division is the public safety answering point for all of fire and EMS calls in Johnson County. All 911 calls go into one of 6 primary dispatch centers, and I've listed those 6 primary dispatch centers on the page. We also contract for service with EMS calls for Miami County, so all EMS calls come into our office as well. The facility that you see on the page is our County Communications Center, which we began construction on in 2007. This facility was built with the idea that if you build it, they will come. So it was constructed to house all of the PSAPs in Johnson County if they so desired, and still has the capacity to do that, whether it be co-location or consolidation. Next slide. Our Technical and Communication Services Division is focused on two areas. One, we have technical support on staff here at the County Communications Center. As you can see in the picture, there is a mound of technology in the center that requires 24/7 support. Additionally, our team administers the countywide radio system, and that countywide radio system is used by public safety and non-public safety users, not only in Johnson County, but across the region. Next slide. Okay, this gives you a snapshot of the Metropolitan Area Regional Radio System, which the Johnson County is one of two hosts for the larger SMARS system. Kansas City is the other. We also have 6 prime sites across the metro. So if you think of it as a large kind of network, all of those systems are interconnected. So not only our emergency responders, but anyone who operates on our radio system has the ability to transition through the counties and the region. And quite frankly, it grows bigger across the state for ease in communication. So it's really a system of systems. And the goal of this was to improve interoperability, reduce overall cost, and really eliminate duplication of systems that we saw in Johnson County and across the region. Next slide. So this is a high level of the Emergency Management Division, and it references some statutes and KARs. And I could get very in-depth about the Emergency Management Division, but again, they're focused on planning, operations, community preparedness, and government preparedness. This division is housed in the lower level of the county administration building where the EOC is located. Next slide. So the EMS System Medical Director, in 2013, there was an interlocal agreement that was executed by the county and the 6 fire agencies. At the time, 6 joined on to create the first full-time EMS Medical Director position that the county has had. And it was chosen that that individual would be housed in our department. Since that time, all of the fire departments have come online and are fully participating in the medical director interlocal agreement. And it's funded, we receive revenues from the fire agencies. Additionally, MedAct and EMC, our department, require medical direction. So he also serves as the medical director for our departments. And I will mention in regards to the medical director that with COVID and through the pandemic, we've really seen some synergies between the medical director and program staff with the Department of Health and Environment related to community health and response. So we're trying to talk through those synergies and figure out how we can collaboratively work together moving forward. Next slide. So really key points I wanted to hit on. We continue to see an increase in 911 calls for service annually. Typically, we see a 3 to 5% increase. When we looked at first quarter of this year compared to first quarter of last year, we saw an 11% increase. That may be attributed to COVID, but we certainly don't know. So we'll be looking at those numbers moving throughout this year. And also county growth, which kind of goes into the next key point, that with county growth, COVID, and the requirements and expectations, we're really looking at opportunities for emergency management, and the demand for services out of that division continues to grow. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the countywide radio system is currently being used by over 50 public safety and non-public safety entities across the county. Some of our service challenges and really opportunities, as a result of the response operations respective to COVID, the Emergency Management Division, we really either truncated or postponed a wide variety of our planning and mitigation and preparedness efforts. And we're beginning to resurrect those, but looking into the future, we're realizing that the community expectations are or may be different than what they were prior to COVID. So we're kind of going to reestablish those and look at lessons learned moving forward. We're continuing to see increased costs with maintaining particularly our countywide radio system. That system is essentially provided at little to no cost to our public safety users. And there's value in that. And moving on to our last one, we are always looking for collaborative opportunities that will address efficiencies both with our internal partners and our external stakeholders. With that, we're adapting to technology, particularly in the 911 environment. And we recognize that the world around us continues to change, and we're trying to be nimble enough to adjust and adapt to that where needed. I went through that fast. Are there questions?
I appreciate your pace, Ellen, as we try to get you and get to MedAct and Paul Davis. But questions for Ellen on the emergency management system? Speak up. I can't see everybody, so please speak up.
Chair, this is Paula Schwach. I have just one quick question, and that is with regard to the countywide radio system, is bandwidth an issue given the number of users?
No, bandwidth's not an issue, and we monitor that all the time. We currently have 9 sites in Johnson County, but the value of being interconnected with other systems, we're able to leverage those systems to ensure that we have enough bandwidth, particularly on the public safety side.
Ellen, this is Greg Smith. I have a standards question that I've asked every presenter, and that's how the charter affects you. Is there anything we can do to change the charter to make your job easier or more efficient, or is it satisfactory as it stands?
No, I know you've asked that question, and I've sat here and tried to think, and I don't think so. For us, I don't think anything needs to change with the charter. I think what's important is educating not only you but the community about how all of us in Johnson County works, but especially the 911 system. There are, the layperson may not understand what 911 looks like in their community. And I think educating on that and informing is important. So anything that the Charter Commission can do to help with that would be incredibly important.
Thank you.
There are 24 people here, a little smarter than they were earlier, Ellen, on that, I think. Dawn, you have a question?
I just had a clarification. Did you say that your calls and usage is up this time, this year compared to last year, even with COVID last year?
Yeah, so we routinely see a 3 to 5% increase. That's the norm, and we've seen that through the last 10 to 15 years, and certainly that's in line with county growth. But when we looked at our first and second quarter of 2020 compared to this year, it is up 11%. So it can be attributed to a number of things. People rely on the 911 system for a lot of things. And so I don't know if COVID directly impacted that, or people are more inclined to use the system for things that they weren't inclined to use it for before. But yes, we are seeing a dramatic increase in comparison.
Mayor Michelson?
A quick one. Do we ever have a situation in recent history where somebody calls 911 and gets put on hold for any significant amount of time?
I cannot speak to, because the 911 calls go into one of those 6 primary law enforcement PSAPs in Johnson County. I can't specifically speak to whether they've had any of those calls. I can tell you that when they get to our center, which is considered a secondary answering point because we only handle fire and EMS calls, we have not put anyone on hold. And you see a lot of that maybe in our surrounding communities. But in Johnson County, I can probably honestly speak and say that we don't see a lot of that.
Ellen, I had one question on your chart about the budgets. Your total budget exceeds local tax support, the 2 bar graphs. What are your other sources of funding other than local tax support? And is local tax support basically ad valorem taxes, property taxes?
Yes.
To the county?
Yes. And we are also supported by the fees, the 911 fees that come in. That's a significant amount of our budget. Those fees are distribution is based on population. So when they come in, the way they're redistributed to the communities is based on population percentage. And that population percentage is revisited every year. And so we rely heavily on those 911 fees to support the 911 operation. We cannot use those fees to pay for personnel costs, but we certainly can use them to pay for a number of things I listed on the slide, but technology and the maintenance and support of not just the county communications center, but our radio system infrastructure as well.
Other questions for Ellen before we move on to Paul Davis and MedAct?
Greg, hey Greg, this is Joy Coaston. Can you hear me?
Sure,
Hello?
Go ahead, Joy.
Yeah, Ellen, could you elaborate some? You said that the expectations of stakeholders had changed a little bit and that you're going to be looking into that. Could you address?
Did you get that generally, Ellen, about the
expectations?
Joy, you are breaking up, so we'll let Ellen answer the first part of your question.
Into?
Joy, you were broken up. I only got the first part, which referenced the expectations. So I specifically was speaking to the emergency management piece related to COVID and moving forward. That I think that it's real to say that the community has different expectations now than they did prior to COVID. I think they're probably better educated now. And I think the work that we've done through COVID to both educate the public and they take kind of their own action to learn. I think what we're hearing is that not necessarily from our partner agencies, but from the community as a whole.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that explanation.
I see no other hands up, but I don't want to cut people off, but we do want to move on. It's 5:41. We'll probably go a little bit beyond 6 if we had a break here with the Facebook issue, but I'll turn it over to Paul Davis of MedAct to be our final presenter today. Paul?
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you, Commission, for allowing me to speak today. Linda's going to pull up my presentation and I'll guide you through that. And give me just a moment. Thank you. MedAct's been serving Johnson County since 1975 as its paramedic ambulance and emergency medical services provider. Through the decades, MedAct has adapted to meet the changing needs of the community as its population has grown. So has our call volume and the way we deliver service. Next slide, please. In 2021 now, MedAct provides not only ambulance transportation, but also serves the county's EMS needs through community education, special operations, and as a partner in the broader healthcare and community wellness initiatives as Johnson County, and we've become Johnson County's sole ambulance service provider. Our mission seeks to ensure our community is safe and is confident in our services. Our MEDAC mission affirms that medical emergencies in Johnson County will have the best possible outcome. Now, this mission is fulfilled as we provide a continuum of out-of-hospital medical care and a prepared community, which results in the community-wide feeling of safety and confidence. Next slide, please. Our medical oversight, by the way, is provided by the physician medical director, who oversees all the patient care activities in Johnson County and includes MedAct, our fire department partners, and the Emergency Communications Center. Now, our values of integrity, trust, compassion, service, humility, and excellence overlay our strategic priorities. Next slide, please. To ensure our mission, we must have an excellent core of personnel, a strong fiscal policy, a robust logistics program, and an effective EMS response system. These four dynamic principles lay the foundation on which our service is built now and in the future. They mutually support our operational success. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Just a brief snapshot of our 2020 operations statistics. As you know, Johnson County is about 476 square miles. In 2020, we responded to over 51,000 EMS calls for service, yet transported only 28,494 patients. We did this with 19 frontline ambulances, including 3 impact ambulances, and I'll talk about those here in a moment. 2 squad units and 2 battalion chief units. Our average response time for calls countywide across all jurisdictions is about 6 minutes and 15 seconds. Next slide, please. However, the crucial measure of our response time requires us to arrive at critical medical emergencies within 10 minutes, 90% of the time. In June of 2021, we met that 10-minute obligation 93% of the time. As of June of 2021, we met that obligation 93% of the time. Now, we also have identified that there are some pockets of the county that are much better, and there are other pockets of the county that need improvement, and we continue to seek to fix those areas. So far in 2021, we've responded to 20,799 incidents, and those include medical emergencies, traumatic emergencies, fire and law enforcement support, and other events. Our average number of daily incidents is about 133 per day. And we've completed 13,522 patient transports to hospitals. The 3 major hospitals that we transport to are Advent Health Shawnee Mission, Overland Park Regional Medical Center, and Olathe Medical Center. The other hospitals fall in closely behind, but these are the top 3, typically based on patient preference. Next slide, please. This is just a quick snapshot of our stations, and we operate in 20 stations around Johnson County. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. As our department grows to meet the demand for services, our budget continues to grow as well. In 2021, we have an approved budget of about $30.11 million. The projected share of the county support through the general fund, ad valorem tax, is about 62%, or $18.59 million, while our anticipated revenue from user fees is about 38%, or about $11.52 million. Now, just to let you know, after some years and some consideration, MedAct did increase its user fees by about 47%. This brought us in line with the rest of the KC Metro area ambulance services, but put us just below the mean within the metro region. So We went from the bottom of the list to just below the middle of the list in terms of how much we charge for ambulance calls. Next slide, please. We are committed to being good stewards of the public trust, and we seek ways to become more efficient and cost conscious. We look toward finding ways to save money before asking for more support. And some examples of MEDAC's efficiency initiatives include implementation of an inventory management system to control costs and stretch allocated budget dollars. We managed to see about $250,000 or $300,000 savings over the last year or so, last couple of years by doing this. We decrease equipment costs by shifting durable goods and startup supply purchases to our partner departments. Previously, we purchased all durable equipments and provided startup supplies through our support services division to our partner departments. Those are the fire departments throughout the county. We've also increased our collection percentage of patient billings 4% to 70% in 2020 from 64% the previous 2 years. And we've implemented and continue to pursue proactive purchasing strategies. Next slide, please. As I stated, MEDAC responds to medical emergencies throughout the county from 20 facilities. This includes our primary facility at Fleming Road and in Harrison, Old 56 in Harrison. We staff 24-hour ambulances and 3 8-hour ambulances. We also provide support services through Tactical Medic Team. These are our SWAT medics who work with law enforcement agencies throughout the county and also deploy sometimes throughout the metro area. We have a bike medic team that performs and provides service at special events such as Old Shawnee Days, Old Settler Days, the fair, and other public events like that. The Hazardous Materials Response Time supports the county's hazardous materials response team in our fire departments, our disaster response team, and emergency operations team, and peer support team to support our own folks. Our strengths lie in our people. Our mission is enlivened by them and through their dedication to service and compassionate care. One of our weaknesses, though, we know is recruitment currently. Our ability to hire necessary staff is hampered by a reduction in the number of people who are seeking a career in public safety and public service. We've stepped up our efforts and outreach to bolster our pool of eligible employees, and including stepping out beyond the region. Next slide, please. We're currently authorized for 159 personnel. Our paramedics staff ambulances and squads, special operations teams, work groups, and community liaisons. They're supported by our logistics and support services personnel, our administrative and business office staff, our education and training team, and our management team. Next slide, please. MEDAC has been a leader throughout the state and the region. Our diverse, educated, and community-minded personnel have been recognized regionally and nationally for their contributions in a variety of public service environments. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Our community education programs enhance our relationships with our residents, and these initiatives help support that feeling of safety and confidence throughout Johnson County. 3 examples that I point to is our Heart Safe hands-only CPR. Our Heart Safe team has been the champions of citizens being trained in CPR, and now over 70,000 people in Johnson County have been trained in CPR. And this has improved our bystander CPR rate from 19% in 2014 to 64% today. Grave Mistakes is a program aimed at high school freshmen and sophomores to warn them about the dangers of distracted driving. This is in conjunction with the district attorney's office. And Stop the Bleed. This is a bleeding control program that is implemented in various departments nationwide And although we don't have the 2020 numbers, unfortunately, that tanked due to COVID. We're starting to see our 2021 numbers rebound. Next slide, please. Our collaborations and partnerships extend throughout the county. As you've heard Jay Leipzig and Robert Sullivan and Ellen Warnicki state, and we extend across jurisdictional boundaries. Through our associations, we provide system-wide medical education, a tiered EMS response system, ensuring the right EMS resources respond in a timely manner, and also that it's clinically appropriate. And we hold the core values of public service, public trust, and public leadership in high esteem as we meet our mission. And that concludes my discussion. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Paul, for that presentation. Questions for Paul on MedAct? Nobody put a call in for service during this meeting, so nobody has yet died of boredom. Nobody's smiling. Questions for Paul?
Mr. Chairman, Paula Schwach again. I'd like to know what happens when an uninsured person needs the services of the MedAct, and if there is anything that can be done to ameliorate that cost.
Thank you very much for that question. So we don't concern ourselves with insurance or the ability to pay or the inability to pay at the time of the 911 call. We go there and we expect our paramedics to take care of the patients. No concern. Now, the bill is an issue, and sometimes people call and request assistance. And so there are opportunities for us to assist with that. We do have a hardship policy. So we may require certain information to help us provide that hardship care or that hardship service. And that could alleviate the bill entirely or in part. We also have payment programs, but we really work hard with the insurance companies, particularly the commercial insurance, to get them to realize that the patient didn't call 911 just for the heck of it, that they were quite frankly experiencing a medical emergency. Now, Medicare and Medicaid are different. So we accept assignment with Medicare and Medicaid. And so there's not a bill beyond what Medicare or Medicaid pays. The lights are going out here. But as far as any consideration or any concern, all they have to do is call and let us know if they have an issue, and we can work with them. We have a variety of opportunities.
Dawn Rattan.
There's been a lot of focus lately on mental health and making sure that we're more responsive to it. Are there people within your department who have a specialty, or what are you doing as you go out to calls to make sure that there's more support for the mental health issues? And has that impacted your staffing and training?
Well, I'll answer it in a couple of points. Firstly, yeah, we do work with our Johnson County Mental Health. We also work through there's a collaborative of the human services departments within Johnson County, including mental health and corrections and MedAct and public health, to identify and address these needs and concerns. Frankly, we do have people slipping through the cracks, and there is no shortage of work for any department or any jurisdiction. So partnership is the key, collaboration is the key, and identifying those. One of the resources we have is My Resource Connection. And that keeps us tuned in to our clients who are experiencing cross-disciplinary activities. And so another part to that is training that you asked. So we do train our folks. We don't have extensive mental health training, We do have the mental health first aid to get us an essential awareness and to know when we need to turf that off. So there are specialists within law enforcement and the community. The mental health department is working with all our jurisdictions right now to enhance mental health services, not just from a reactive but a proactive standpoint. And we know that we can call and refer right from the scene to a mental health professional.
Joy. Joy, you have your hand up. I don't know if your connection's strong enough to ask a question.
It'll help if I take off the mute.
Your connection's very weak, Joy. You're very garbled.
Maybe type it in.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you in a very garbled fashion.
Can you hear me?
Not really. No.
Okay, maybe that'll help.
There you go.
Can you? Okay, so sorry. I've been having some problems with my connection. Can you tell us a little bit more about your recruitment problems and what we might do to support your efforts? From the charter, is there a way that we can perhaps assist in getting other younger people or people in transition to new jobs into this career path?
Well, I don't think there's anything that the charter can do specifically, but our challenge right now is just getting licensed people to come to work for us. We're in one of those unique situations where we require our paramedics to have a license before they get here. And so enrollment in the paramedic programs is down, and we're seeing that across the country. Couple that with, it seems like a degree of pursuing private sector, non-public service type work. And so those are our challenges. And I think there's probably some teamwork that we could engage in. And we are doing that, looking at our recruitment strategies. But I'm not really sure what specifically the charter might help in other than just helping us get the word out. We need people. We need to get them enrolled in the program and get them licensed. So we do have outreach underway at some of the high schools where we're present, and also the community colleges where the programs are underway.
And so is the licensing issue that they can't get access to the licensing exam? What's the holdup there?
No, I think it's enrollment in the paramedic program. So it's it's an associate's degree program, and just getting people into the program is difficult.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Paul, this is Greg. I have a question. You mentioned one of your efficiency initiatives was to shift some durable goods and startup supply purchases to your partner departments. One of the things that 10 years ago, the Charter Commission talked about was collaboration between the various governmental levels in Johnson County. Could somebody look at that and say that's just a shifting of cost to a different set of taxpayers?
They could, but I'll answer your question about the collaboration among the departments in Johnson County. So over the last couple of years, we have engaged our facilities department and our fleet department. So facilities has now taken over the management of our buildings. And so those cost centers have shifted to facilities, and same with fleet. So instead of managing our own fleet and purchasing our own fleet, we work specifically with facilities to make sure that we're taking advantage of buying values in bulk and so on. So we have achieved those collaborations.
Other questions for Paul? We are slightly past our 6 o'clock stop time, but I hope everybody's okay if we have more questions. And Paul, as we talk to others, there may be some follow-up questions that will be circulated through Linda Sater, the Deputy County Clerk, to get to you to respond in writing as people reflect on your presentation today.
Okay.
I don't see anybody else with hands up. So I'm going to let Paul go. Thank you again for your time and your department's work to put this together.
Thank you.
Our next meeting again is scheduled for June 23rd at 4 p.m. at the KU Edwards campus, 126th and Quivira. Presentations will be by the library, the Parks and Recreation Department, and the appraiser. The library and Parks and Rec are both, I'm not sure what the right word is, quasi-independent boards appointed by the county commission who have a mill levy authority with the county commission's approval. So we will allot them some additional time, and then the county appraiser's office. Are there any other comments or questions from the group before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Seeing none, is there somebody willing to move to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, this is Denning. I would make the motion to adjourn.
Motion by Senator Denning to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second
by Greg Smith.
Second by Greg Smith. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. We'll look forward to seeing as many of you as possible on June 23rd in person. It will be a unique experience. Thank you all.
Aye.
Wow.